everybody. Welcome to today's session. My name is Cindy Haight. I'll be hosting the session today. We have Sabrina Ippolito is here as our esteemed presenter. And today we're going to be discussing implementing a QMS and where to start. Today, this is the first session in our 2024 QMS webinar series. So Sabrina and I did this together last year, and I think we have another 4 or 5 sessions planned throughout 2024. So you can look forward to receiving information about that. There's a little bit about us. Again, I'm Cindy Haight. I work for certification and training sales here at SGS. I've been with the company just over 2 years now, and have worked in the certification and training sectors of this business for about 20 years. I came to SGS to work in the training department, and it's been wonderful. I've learned a lot. We have a lot of amazing courses and trainers, and now I have the pleasure to work on the certification side as well. I'd like to introduce you to your speaker today, Ms. Sabrina Ippolito. Sabrina works for SGS as one of our lead auditors for various ISO standards, and she's one of our lead trainers. You can see that she's a classically trained biochemist. She's a certified lead auditor. She's helped various organizations go through the process to achieve their quality management objectives. So she's got a lot of great information to share with us today. I wanted to share just a little bit of information about SGS. You can see we were founded in 1878, so we're almost 150 years old at this point. We got our foundation in the marine inspection industries way back in 1878. And since then have diversified to become one of the global leaders in the TIC industries, which is testing, inspection, and certification. We are headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland, and you can see there we employ nearly 100,000 people across the globe, over 2,600 offices and labs, and we have 7 focused areas for our services. So SGS brings together these 5 very important concepts for the way that we do business and what we bring to the table. You can see we have an extensive global network, as I mentioned. We have offices and auditors located all over the place so that we can definitely meet with our customers' needs who have global reach. We have a very high quality of service. So we're coming into your businesses and auditing you against your quality management system, against the standard requirements, and we hold ourselves to the same high quality level. So we strive very hard to make sure we're always providing the highest level of quality of service. We have industry expertise. Our auditors don't come straight to us from college. They've worked in their industries for years to, obtain the knowledge and expertise to be able to be qualified to come and audit your companies. SGS has a focus on digital innovation. We always try to keep abreast of new things that are coming in the industries and what have you, so that we are on top of the game and able to, keep our customers advised of anything new that's coming down the pipeline, or any, new things that are developing with standards, etc. SGS also has a very strong corporate sustainability initiative. We work very hard to ensure that we are reducing our carbon footprint and maintaining happy customers, happy and safe employees, and that these are the 5 foundations of how we manage our business and our partnerships. So Sabrina and I work for the Business Assurance Division here at SGS, and these are 6 of our main focused areas of our services. Of course, we offer assessment, auditing, certification, as well as training through SGS Academy. We do have a new service we've launched. It's a supply chain risk management service called Seymour. It's a online database in a quick overview and nutshell, that we do a risk analysis for you, so your supply chain and the risk levels are available at a glance. If you'd like to learn more about that, you can always comment in the Q&A section, and I'll follow up with you later on after the session. We do offer sustainability assurance services, everything from training through, we offer a 4-hour one-on-one executive coaching seminar, all the way to the full array of services to help you embark on your sustainability journey. Again, if you'd like to learn more about that, please drop a comment or a question in the Q&A section, and I'll follow up with you after the session today. We also offer consulting services through MainPoint. It's a business consulting, not management system consulting, but they do risk analysis, and they really help to streamline operations for various companies. And we also have a full range of medical device regulatory compliance services, and are currently accepting applications for MDR, which is the new regulation. In order to be able to sell your products into Europe, you have to be compliant with MDR. If you'd like more information, please let us know. All right, so here's our agenda. This time I'm going to hand it over to Sabrina. Sabrina's got some issue with her camera, so you can focus on the slide content today. Please, if you do have questions about the content or anything else, leave that in the Q&A area. We will try to get to questions at the end of the session today. If we don't have time to get to your question, we will reply via email separately. There's going to be some poll questions throughout the session today. You can click right on your answer on the screen if you'd like to participate. And please know that we will be sending you a link to the recording of this session, as well as a link to the slides themselves. So we'll share this to you all after the session today. Thanks, enjoy the learning process, and we'll wrap up with some Q&A at the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy. That was awesome. And thank you for the wonderful introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Sabrina Polito, like Cindy mentioned. I am so excited to be here to talk to you about a very, very important topic. Especially if you work in quality. I know maybe at some point you may have been dubbed as the individual who would spearhead the implementation process for a management system, whether it's a quality management system like an ISO 9001 standard, or an environmental management system, or any other management system. So what I have outlined for you today is just a very brief introduction of ISO 9001, a typical situation, actually many situations that I've seen are always relating to, well, I know I have to implement a system, but where do I start? So this is the typical situation that I've been privy to. What are the implementation process? What would that be like? So what are the 10 steps that you would typically follow? And like Cindy mentioned, we will end our session with some Q&A, some questions and answer period. So without further ado, let's start. So what is ISO 9001? ISO 9001 is the international standard that specifies the requirements for a quality management system. So this is also abbreviated as QMS. Organizations typically use the standard to demonstrate the ability to consistently provide products and or services that meet customer and regulatory requirements. So as a quality management professional, you know all too well that your world is in constant flux, with ever increasing customer expectations, a highly dynamic regulatory environment, and supply chains that are more disrupted than ever before. Quality is under pressure on all sides. At the same time, the legal, financial, and brand reputation consequences for poor quality are greater than ever before, and in some cases as existential to an organization. Now, more than ever, quality matters in organizations of all sizes around the world. Whether you are a small organization or a large organization, quality matters. So quality management system approach. So the QMS, the QMS approach encourages organization to identify accurately customer needs and expectations. So what are their needs, the wants, and the expectations of organizations that we're wanting to do business with? Define the processes that contribute to achieving products or services that meet customer requirements. They keep processes under control, which is very important, because if you have departments of many individuals or many employees, it is important that we align how the work or how the job gets done. People can come in from different backgrounds or have had different experiences, and therefore they would implement their own processes. Well, what we are looking for when we're implementing a QMS is an alignment, so that everyone that works in a department works in a similar fashion. A QMS helps to resolve quality problems relatively quickly. It provides a framework for the continual improvement and enhancing customer satisfaction. Something we are all wanting is to ensure that our customers are satisfied with the level of quality, whether it's level of quality in relating to the service that they've received or with the product that we're manufacturing and providing them. The last point is super important. We want top managers to participate in the development, in the implementation and improvement of the QMS. It's not enough just to say, okay, I am going to call out on Sabrina to spearhead the project and then wash my hands clean. We want the top leaders, top management to play an active role in developing and in implementing the QMS. And that can look like, for instance, they might be part of a training event or of a learning event, so part of a training workshop, or when they're putting together or they're identifying or studying the context of the organization, they might be part of that meeting as well. So we want to see active representation of top management. So this brings us to our very first poll question. Do you have a QMS, a quality management system, already implemented within your organization? I'll give you a couple of minutes. So we're at about 48% attendees. Let's see if we could get a couple more in there. Okay, we're going. And let's see what we have. So we have, yes, I have a QMS implemented within the organization I work for. And I have about almost 20% of you say that, no, you do not have a QMS implemented within the organization you work for. Okay, good. So you know that even if you have a QMS implemented and it's a QMS that's been put in place many years ago, there's always room for improvement. So this gives me a pretty good idea in terms of who my audience is and the fact that you actually do have a QMS in place. Fabulous. So this is your typical situation. So after much discussion, contemplating, and budgeting, management has finally decided to implement a QMS. Finally, some structure and control where every day will not seem like you are constantly walking into a battlefield. You acknowledge that this is an excellent step forward in the right direction. You acknowledge a QMS will allow for a decent amount of structure within the organization, aligning the organization's strengths, vision, and purpose with the customer's needs, wants, and expectations. You look forward to working proactively towards meeting goals, expectations, and targets instead of the reactive mode you've been operating in. You have been nominated as the lucky winner to spearhead this project forward. So all too often, we realize that while we want and sometimes need change within the organization, we really do not want to be nominated as the person to undertake this daunting task. Often enough, we do not know where or even how to start. Does that sound familiar? So here's the next poll question. Have you ever been nominated to undertake a QMS implementation project before? Let's wait a couple more seconds. Okay. Nice. I got about 2/3 of you. Oh, be interested to know how that went. So if you answered yes, I'm not saying it was your case, but if you answered yes, you probably felt the world's weight on your shoulders. The nomination may have left you feeling anxious as you're now in charge of this undertaking, which you may know very little about. And the success of this project rests entirely on your shoulders. In most cases, and this is really based on what I have seen happen, especially within organizations that were transitioning from the 2008 version of the standard to the 2015 version of the standard, people have either quit and say, I just don't know what it is that I need to do or how I'm going to meet the requirements of the new standard. Some people, some individuals in quality or some organizations left the project to the 11th hour, ultimately leaving no other option than to quit. So in conclusion, ultimately, the results of such an undertaking has usually been quit. And this is what I've seen. So this is using my kaleidoscope and having supported organizations for close to 10 years now. This is what I've seen occur in industry. So where do you start? Well, simply put, we do not know what we do not know. So consider an implementation project as a process. Identify your different activities in a logical manner. And I cannot express this enough. It has to be logical. This range everything from sales to shipping, customer support, and any additional processes such as HR, waste management, if this is part of your quality system. Sketch out a schedule or timeline. Be flexible and show yourself some grace as you are going to be managing several different moving parts at once. And lastly, keep in mind, you're not expected to undertake this completely on your own. So delegate and become very good at delegating. So let's do a deep dive in our 10 different steps. So step one, we have receive training on the fundamental requirements of ISO 9001, which is your standard. Now, bear in mind, ladies and gents, when we're talking about this, or these 10 steps, albeit that they are geared towards ISO 9001, which is your QMS, your quality management system, remember that you can adopt these 10 steps to any type of management system that you're wanting to implement, or maybe you might want to go towards having an integrated management system. So you might have an ISO 9001 along with 14,001 and 45,001 and maybe even a 27,001. So that's what we would typically call an IMS if you would have, let's say, all those four together, or more than one combined together. So set your intention. So when you are going to be receiving this training, or when you are applying to get training for 9001, set your intention. You can expect, so for any fundamentals course, you can expect to enroll in a 2-day training course. I recommend a quiet area if you are attending the training session remotely. Preferably, if you can, try to do this at home. The problem when attending training remotely from work is that there are far too many distractions, and like it or not, you will probably leave the training session to provide support when you are being called on. And I can speak to this point because I've given training, like Cindy pointed out, I do also train for SGS. And on many occasions where I'm training and I like to call on people to get so that they can give their perspective, sure and behold, they're not there. They had to step out. They had to take a call or whatever it is. So just keep this in mind. If a fundamentals requirements course is something that you are wanting to take, maybe you might want to be implementing another standard. When you are taking these courses, do think of an area where you are not going to be disturbed and you can just focus entirely on the information that's being given to you during the training event, the learning event. There will be lots of information, so refine your note-taking skills. Ask lots of questions we often do not ask, or some questions that you might want to think about asking your trainer is, how would that look like implemented? What exactly is meant by X clause, and what are examples that an auditor will look for when assessing conformance to it? Can you provide recommendations on streamlining a blank process? Now, the last question is a really interesting question, because some people are so hung up with, and I am guilty of this too, with, okay, well, we need an SOP for everything. Well, the thing is, you might not need an SOP. Depending on what your ultimate goal is, you might decide that a procedure, something very high level, is not really required. You might need a work instruction in place. Like, for instance, if you're in production and you want to be able to carry out a process for compounding, you might want to have step by step, what is it that needs to be added first to your batch, second to your batch, third to a batch, how much mixing time is required, do I need to increase the temperature, do I need to monitor the temperature? So something like this might look like a work instruction and not necessarily a procedure. So like I said, when you're thinking, especially about the last question, think about what is it exactly that you're looking for as an end result. Consider this, your training session will end in a few days. Once complete, your trainer will not be there to advise you. So leverage their expertise as much as you can. As you go through the training, you should feel like you can put together an execution plan and execute it successfully. So basically, once your training ends and you're sitting in front of your computer, do you know what to do? And are you comfortable in executing that? Step 2, map out the process of your organization. So a typical process might look like, so I'm taking over here, for instance, the perspective of manufacturing a product. And I think I saw a question coming up that, well, what if I don't have a product that I'm manufacturing, but it's a service instead? Well, the thing is, your typical process within the company should not deviate all that much from what I'm outlining here. So you would start off with sales. Then you might, let's say if you are providing the service of pest control, there might be things that you need to purchase. Once you purchase something, you need to receive what you've purchased. You might want to do an inspection. Is what I have written on the PO, is that reflected on what I've received? There might be an inventory management process that you have in place. And I would be very surprised if organizations don't have this, only because these are assets. You want to know what is it that you have on hand in stock. Scheduling becomes important, because now that you've received all of this material and it's placed in inventory, your scheduling manager, or the individual that is responsible for scheduling, can see, well, I have everything I need to produce a product or to provide the service that I now need to provide. So you might change production for service provision, or for just services, as an example. If you're producing, you'll have an in-process check. You may have in-process checks, and you might also have finished goods check. So if you've determined throughout a process that there are critical aspects that need to be verified, just to make sure that you're not going to derail, you will have what we call in-process QC checks. So this really depends on your organization. More often than not, for organizations where they'll manufacture and they realize that, hey, we do not have anything within our process that requires us to do a critical check or an in-process check, then they may have a finished goods check instead. Organizations that I typically work with will have both in-process and finished goods. Then from finished goods, we have inventory management, and finally we have shipping. But bear in mind that we also have additional supporting processes. And what do these include? And again, remember, this may differ all depending on your organization, but most organizations will have QA activities such as management review, internal audits, non-conformances, corrective action requests, risk management, project improvements, customer complaints, document control, etc. HR, human resources, waste management, if that pertains to you, equipment maintenance, calibration and IT, and pest control. And again, this all depends within your organization. Like, for instance, if we're talking about an organization that manufactures or food product, or seals of some sort, which are being used in food manufacturing or in pharmaceuticals or in cosmetics, they may have a pest control program. But if you know your products are never going to come in contact with pest control, and you say, well, we're making parts, or we're making, a subcomponent that is going into a welding industry, then in that case, you might decide that, well, pest control is something that you don't necessarily need to have, albeit it would be nice to have. So take advantage of this step. So step 2 is an important step. Take advantage of the step and streamline your current documentation. What does this entail? Identify what manuals, policies, procedures, reference documents, addenda, forms, records, and logs, whatever type of documentation you currently have, fall in each of these categories that I just discussed. And remember, the last part where we have the supporting processes, this is not an exhaustive list. This is not a 1-hour task. So start this early on in the week, on a Monday morning, for instance, and get people involved. Remind everyone that a management system requires involvement of all pertinent parties. Your job, if you're the one who's been nominated to spearhead this process forward, your job as an SME, as a subject matter expert, is to direct, coordinate, and provide support where it's needed. Step 3, structure your documentation. Plan the structure of your QMS. What manuals, procedures, and work instructions are required? In addition, forms and records, or logs, if you will. Assign actions, timescales to develop management system documentation. Set up regular project status meetings with management to review the progress. I cannot tell you how important step 3 is, because when you are working within an organization, things have to go out the door. There's always something to do. So block yourself. If you know that you want to invest 10% of your week to putting or implementing a QMS, that's a block of about 3.5 to 4 hours a week. But block it off so that you know this is what I'm going to do and this is planned in my weekly schedule. And that cannot be moved. What ends up happening is that when you decide that, okay, I'm going to skip next week, this week, I'll resume next week, it is very easy to derail. I've seen it happen. So just keep this in mind. If you know that you're in charge of implementing it, block yourself a day, 4 hours in a week, whatever time, whatever percentage of your week you can dedicate to the implementation, that's what you should be blocking off in your schedule. And stick to it. That's another important thing. Stick to it. Identify any long leads. As an example, validation work. Validation, it does not happen in a span of a week. Validation can sometimes take months. Equipment acquisitions, and plan for that implementation. Get people involved. Like I said, you are an SME, you're a subject matter expert on what it is that you do. You cannot have mastered all aspects of the organization. So it becomes very important that you get, or that you have collaboration of your colleagues. And this is also why it's important that you have the backing and that leadership plays an active role in this implementation. And also, finally, you want to be able to train your personnel. Step 4, you want to create the documented information judged necessary. So why do I say judged necessary? It's because every organization is different. Even if you belong to the same industry, your needs and your requirements might be very different than your competitors' needs and requirements. So you have to determine what makes sense for us to document. And that's the beauty with the ISO 9001, the 2015 version of the standard, is that it has very limited things that it requests you to have documented. But when it comes to procedures, work instructions, forms, records, it will not tell you this is what we need to see drawn out on paper, so pen to paper. You need to make the decision yourselves. Do I need to document this? What happens if SMEs that belong to this department are not there? Will the department crumble? Yes or no? And you will come up with this solution or the answer to this question, not alone, again, with your colleagues. So after your 2-day training session and identifying what your processes are, classing documentation in its proper home, itemize what is missing and fill in those gaps to the best of your ability. This will likely require several brainstorming sessions. So if you judge a process or work instruction should be documented, call on 1 to 2 people who carry out the process and author it step by step. So what does that look like? Well, you'll verbatim ask them, what is it that you do? Put it step by step, document that. Where reference documents, work instructions, forms, logs are needed, be sure also to mention them into your procedure. Now, when you are doing this, when you're performing this task, what I recommend that you also do is always ask HR to provide you with an updated organizational chart so that you are not saying, okay, well, it's the quality control supervisor, when in reality, you don't have a QC supervisor, you have a quality control coordinator. It's important that you name out the individuals as they are documented on that org chart, verbatim. I've seen in too many cases, and I'd say easily 8 out of 10, where the majority of, 80% of my clients, they will write down similar roles, but not exactly what's named or called out on the organizational chart. So before you start documenting step by step what has to be documented or what are the steps to carry out that activity, always ask HR, provide me with an updated organizational chart so that you have a document that you can reference. It's important to also document, as an example, the probability or the frequency that said activity takes place. So that too needs to be documented. Where where you're mentioning work instructions, forms, logs, records, addenda, anything that an individual is required to use as a tool, mention that as well in the procedure or in your work instruction. If working on risk or determining the needs, the wants, and the expectations of interested parties, if you are targeting this assignment, again, call people in those departments. If you want to determine what are the risks that are related to sales and you happen to be working in quality, you have a general idea what risks are related to sales. But if you call on your colleagues, they will tell you exactly what are the issues that they're dealing with on a daily. Like, I'll give you an example. One of the risks that one of the companies I was supporting told me, and I thought it was genius. So we know what she says, well, we know what the regular risks with sales are, erreur de frappe, so writing down or punching in the wrong information, the wrong code on the keypad, as an example. So, and I said, well, okay, I said, that's a risk that I guess we all make. It's irrelevant to sales. And she says, yeah, but it's a pertinent issue when it comes to sales. I said, okay, point taken. She says, but when they called on sales, they realized that, she told me, she says, Sabrina, she says, we never realized that so many quotes are going out, but because we're short-staffed, there's no process in place to do a follow-up on the quotes that are going out. So she says, we spend all of this time, all of our resources sending out quotes, but sometimes our quotes don't become POs right away. We do need to do that follow-up. She says, we didn't know this until it was brought up by one of our leads in sales. So I thought that was really interesting. And it's not necessarily something that we would typically think of unless we actually belong to that department and unless we're actually questioning and asking those questions. So there is a benefit in bringing in people from different departments. Plus, it helps also with the buy-in, because the processes that you're implementing, the management system that you're putting in place, or even the management system that you're tweaking and making updates to, are not going to be the management system of Sabrina or the individual that's been tasked to implement this. It's really a collaborative effort. So these exercises are meant for you to think critically about your organization so that your business's strengths are well aligned with the customer's needs, taking into account strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It is nearly impossible to master every area within the organization, which is why you call on your allies to help you put this together. Your role is to direct and structure the conversation so that you are not deviating off topic. So here we have step 5, awareness training. So if certification is the goal, so this is if you're planning on certifying. Not everybody who implements a QMS wants to get certified. Some people are just looking to have a control. But if you are planning on being certified, it is paramount that you train everybody on section 7.3, which is called awareness. This is in the standard of 9001. So the organization shall ensure that people doing work under the organization's control are, 1, aware of the quality policy, that they are aware of the relevant quality objectives, and your quality objectives should be quantifiable, not qualitative, but quantitative, and they should be related to the policy. Their contribution to the effectiveness of the QMS, including the benefits of improved performance and the implications or consequences of not conforming with the QMS. And when we're talking about consequences, we're not talking about, oh, you'll get a written warning or you're going to lose your job. No, think of what are the consequences when we don't follow what's documented. We can lose sales, we can lose customers, we can increase our number of non-conformances, we can increase the number of customer complaints. These are all negative things that we don't want. So we want to streamline our processes. Yes, we want to be efficient and effective in our processes, absolutely. We want to be as lean as we possibly can, but also we want to work within the limits of our quality management system. So once you think you have objective evidence for all the areas covered under your QMS standard, you are going to use the actual standard and line by line, and you're going to cross-reference the documentation that you have in place. So the documentation being your procedures, your work instructions, forms, logs, records. You're going to cross-reference everything that you have with the standard, line by line. My approach is on the margin of the standard. I document procedures, work instructions, Excel spreadsheets, manuals, etc. that answer said requirement, said clause, or subclause. In this way, I validate that I meet the minimum requirements of the subclause. If your gap assessment suggests that you are missing something or you did not adequately address the subclause, then close the gap. This can be achieved by documenting a work instruction, a process, a form, a log, whatever it is. Do this by whatever means necessary to address the situation. Now, just as a side note, we just went through steps 4 and 5 also. Keep in mind that steps 4 and 5 are interchangeable. I like performing the gap assessment as step 6 because I design my quality systems to meet the requirements of the standard based on a process approach, not the other way around. This works magnificently. The gap assessment is a formality and a way of double checking that I have dotted all my I's and crossed all my T's. I use this also to decrease any stress and any anxiety leading towards any planned audits or even unplanned audits. And also, it is a brilliant way of creating a memory aid should you not be available during an audit. So say you win the lottery and you happen to take a year-long vacation around the world, someone is probably going to have to entertain the audit in your stead. So with this manual, you now have a memory aid, and someone who's going to be replacing you for that audit will know exactly what documents to pull out whenever the auditor or whenever someone is requesting something within the standard itself. Step 7, sign up for internal auditor training. So your commitment when it comes to internal auditor training is a one-day training course. You can do this also at the same time that you are doing your fundamentals course. So the fundamentals course, like I said, is a 2-day training course. We also offer the 1-day course following this 2-day training course. But if you think all of this information is convoluted, you might mix up one thing for something else and you want to do this in parts, then you can sign up for a 1-day training course when you are ready to actually do an internal audit. We give you a lot of tips, a lot of tricks, a lot of I know with my trainees, I provide them a lot of tools that I normally use because I streamline my courses and I streamline the work that I have to do so that I'm not putting in more information that I have to, but my role as a quality individual is really to provide support where it's needed. So this will allow you to gain knowledge and the tools necessary to conduct internal audits of your processes within your organization. So like the fundamentals training course, set your intention. Opt for, if you can, an in-person training instead of remote. But if you're going to do this remote, again, try to find a quiet place in which you can do this. Ask plenty of questions. Remember, an audit schedule is an input to an audit plan. The audit plan, when you create the audit plan, this is an input to actually carrying out the audit. The outputs of doing an audit include the audit report, your corrective actions, opportunities for improvement, and bravos. Two additional side notes about performing an internal audit. Like I said, if certification is what you want, when you're performing an internal audit, you must carry out a complete internal audit the first year. Moving forward, you are allowed to do partial audits, but you have to ensure that there is an audit report that is documented every single year. How you decide to do it, it's up to you. You can do this throughout the year. You can do this within a certain week in the year or a certain month within the year. You decide. Another important thing to note when it comes to internal audits, as an internal auditor, you are not required to classify your nonconformances. You don't have to say it's minor. You don't have to say it's major. You don't have to say it's catastrophic. All you have to do is say, yes, it's a nonconformance because our procedure says we need to do this, but we did that instead. So all you are required to do is to say it's a nonconformance. You're not required to classify. I think it's great for organizations to get into the habit of documenting opportunities for improvement, and even more so, bravos. Bravos is what is it that you are doing exceedingly and exceptionally well. While internal audits can be outsourced, so that's another important note, you can outsource your internal audits. If you plan on conducting internal audits yourself, please make sure you are at least 2 people from within your organization, preferably from different departments, as you cannot audit your own work. Now you can say, well, you know, Sabrina, we're kind of strapped for budget. Can I take the course and then maybe provide guidance to my colleague? Absolutely. It's called knowledge transfer. 100% you're allowed to do that. And also, like I said, flexibility within your QMS is a good thing. So don't shy away by actually putting in your internal audit procedure, if you judge necessary to have that procedure in place, that internal audits are done internally, but in the event of whatever reason, they can be conducted by an external third party, and the external third party acts on behalf of your organization, providing you an audit report, corrective actions, and so on and so forth. Your job is to make sure that the individual who's going to do the work on your behalf has the proper training. So is ISO 9001 certified, as an example, does work as a consultant and has experience with quality management systems. Step 8, conduct a complete internal audit of your QMS. So a complete internal audit of your QMS is required upon the first year of implementation, especially if the goal is certification. This goes hand in hand with what I just finished saying. Moving forward, so post-certification, you may opt for complete or partial internal audits. Whatever decision you make, you must provide an audit report annually. The audit report annually, even if it's a partial internal audit, is required. Your audit team should include subject matter experts in different departments. If you are responsible for the execution of the internal audit, please keep in mind impartiality. You cannot audit your own work. Corrective actions must be open for all nonconformances. I cannot tell you how important this is. If you are seeing that there is a nonconformance, you have to open up a corrective action. It's not oh, well, we fixed it when we found out that it was a nonconformance. No, it has to be documented. In some cases, you might still be in the tweaking phase of your QMS. So do not be surprised if you find yourself making minor or significant changes in your documentation. My recommendation: do not use a checklist for internal audits. You want to use it as a tool, go right ahead, but do not use it and base yourself or base an internal audit on a checklist. They are a great incentive to deviate from what is captured in the procedures. Instead, what I recommend that you do is use the work instructions and the procedures as a guide. Show me that you're doing this. The procedure says that you should be doing this on step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Is this accurate? Show me that you're doing it. How do you do it? When you're using your procedure and your work instructions and the actual documentation that makes up your QMS, this will allow you to fine tune the details. And besides, it does act as a checklist. So why not use your procedures and your work instructions? And remember, your procedures and your work instructions, they shouldn't be convoluted. You're not writing a dissertation. If you find yourself that a procedure is about 20, 30 pages long, guess what? Nobody's going to use it. And then instead of a procedure, you might think, well, why not use a workflow instead? A workflow chart instead. That too is another neat way of implementing processes, and it's simplistic. So it's a nice visual aid for individuals, for people. Step 9, you want to conduct a management review, like internal audits. So internal audits are mandatory. So like internal audits, management reviews are also mandatory and must be carried out at least annually after the completion of an internal audit. So why can I only do my management review after the internal audit? Is because the output of the internal audit, so your conclusion to the internal audit in terms of how many non-conformances, how many opportunities for improvement, all of the conclusion that comes from that internal audit acts as an input into the management reviews. It's one of the inputs. So this is why we don't do a management review before an internal audit, but we do the internal audit first, and then we do the management review. So keeping these meetings brief, no more than 1 to 2 hours is suggested. Remember, it's not a Dear Abby session. The purpose of this meeting is to provide a summary of different areas within your QMS. So it's a health check of your quality management system, if you will. Collectively, the decision makers are now in a position to make the best decisions possible with the information on hand. When possible, use comparables. Compare current data to previous quarters or previous years. Your data should reflect the message you're trying to get across. So I'll give you an example. Let's say if one of your quality objectives was, we want to decrease the number of non-conformances. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to show how many non-conformances that I have in 2020, that I have in 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024 year to date, as an example. And based on that, you might want to show a graph, and you'll show a broken line graph, and hopefully with the quality objective of wanting to decrease the number of non-conformances, you'll see a negative slope. That's what your aim is. That's what your quality objective is. So remember, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Use it to your benefit. Always go back and ask yourself, what is it that I'm trying to give as information? What's the point of what I'm trying to give as it relates to, let's say, non-conformances or corrective actions? Maybe another important point might be, well, what were the top 3 non-conformances that we had this year in comparison to last year? Because I'll tell you one thing, if the top 3 keep repeating themselves, then guess what? You now have projects for the following year and say, well, maybe there's something we need to look at a little bit closely over here, because these non-conformances keep coming up every single year. So like I mentioned, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Make use of tables, graphs, and charts when necessary, and present your management review using a PowerPoint presentation capturing both the inputs and the outputs of the meeting. So this is all found in section 9 of the standard. Step 10. So I put step 10 over here specifically if your goal is certification, for some of you that do not have a QMS in place. So if the goal is certification, you want to call, so when you're ready and you feel confident, and shortly after you've done your management review, you want to call a certification bureau like SGS and schedule a stage 1 and a stage 2 audit of your QMS. Naturally, you can also call after you have completed your internal audit as by this time you'll have a pretty good general idea on what your corrective actions are and the time necessary to close them off. My recommendation: schedule a stage 1 and stage 2 audit once the management review is complete. This will allow you to do a good test run of your QMS, make any necessary adjustments that are discussed during the management review. And if you feel you still have room for improvement prior to the external audit, you can address those concerns. So I mentioned stage 1 and stage 2 a couple of times. Let's just look at what those are. Your stage 1 confirms that you are ready for the full audit. So the certification bureau validates that you have a place, well, by CB, I mean an auditor from the CB will validate that you have in place all required processes, related procedures, and that your resources are ready. And we'll also verify and validate that if you are using any of the SGS logos or any of our accreditation bureau logos, that you're using them accordingly and appropriately. Stage 2 is your certification audit. So this is where we determine that yes, you will be certified, or no, there will be no certification because you have too many majors, but we will make a next appointment to ensure that we can close off those majors and therefore then certify you. So that is typically what is done during stage 2. I've had requests before: Sabrina, can we do a stage 1 and a stage 2 within the same week? Or can we do the stage 2 right the day following stage 1? I don't recommend it because it's a good risk that you're taking. What happens if during stage 1 you have nonconformances which are actually major nonconformances? Then what? So I usually like to say, better safe than sorry. Plan your stage 1, a month later do your stage 2. A couple of weeks later, do your stage 2, but essentially work with your auditor. Alrighty then. So let's look at our next poll question. When implementing a QMS, organizations must work with an external consultant. True or false? So are you required to work with a consultant when you are implementing a QMS? Let's see. That is exactly correct. For those of you that mentioned or said false, you are 100% correct. You are not required to work with an external consultant. You can if you want, but it is not a requirement. Good, fantastic. So on that note, I now transfer this over to Cindy.
Thank you, Sabrina. That was a great session. We really appreciate everyone who attended today. It was, we hope you found it to be valuable and value added. You can see there's our YouTube channel. It's at SGS North America. There's a lot of content on our YouTube channel. We're adding more content all the time. So I would love if you guys would click through or scan that QR code and subscribe to our channel. Here are some training classes that we have coming up for ISO 9001. As Sabrina mentioned, our training classes are modular in nature, so there's requirements built into internal auditor, which builds into the lead auditor. So if you're interested, let me know. When you get these slides, you'll be able to click through either to the US or the Canadian website, so you can register or review the information and available dates. So thank you guys so much. We have time for a couple of questions here. Sabrina, what is the approach for a company which only provides services, no manufacturing? What's the difference for a service-oriented company?
That's a good question. So I sort of spoke about that earlier. So you're still like it's still important that you realize or that you document what are the processes within your organization. Like I said, it doesn't really change all that much, especially if you're producing a product. In providing a service, you would really change the word production for servicing. And I mean, it depends on what you're servicing. If you're providing consultancy, okay, fine. Granted, you may not be purchasing something per se, or maybe you are. Maybe you're purchasing software. So you would apply the same framework as what we saw on one of the earlier slides. But like I said, remove the word production for service, and then work your way through and ask yourself, you know, what the sales entail? What does purchasing entail? If you do purchase, if you're not purchasing anything, then you can just forget about that one entirely. So it's very similar to the one in production. You can still use the same framework.
And Sabrina, to build on that, what about the design process? Like, can you design a service or a solution as a service or organization? Does design always apply?
Design doesn't always apply. So let's say if I'm making a widget of whatever, I might get a design from my client. My client might provide me with the design and say, here, we want you to do this for us. In that case, because a plan is provided to an organization by an external source, design does not apply to the organization that's manufacturing that widget.
And what about for a service organization?
Well, if you would be designing, let's say if you're designing, well, in that case, I mean, if you're not manufacturing anything, you wouldn't necessarily need to design. But I mean, if you're designing, let's say, a web page, then you'd have to see how you would, I suppose, like, what are your limits as an organization? Are you going to be servicing the design of the web page entirely from, you know, and still provide support on a daily, weekly, monthly process? Like, it depends on what the goal is and how that requirement, section 8.3, or how you would be meeting that requirement. But the thing is, and this is also a very important note, if you do not meet that requirement, or if a requirement within the standard does not apply to your industry, does not apply to what it is that you are producing, whether it's a product or providing a service, then you would justify accordingly. And remember, the justification aspects, they don't have to, you're not writing a dissertation. Like, 1 or 2 sentences as to why it doesn't apply to you is more than sufficient.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Guys, we are just over the hour, so I don't want to take too much of your time. Thank you for staying with us all the way through the end of the session today. We will be sending you the recording, the link to the recording here probably early next week, along with a copy of the slides. There's our email addresses. Please feel free to reach out to Sabrina with questions about the content, or for me if you'd like to learn more about any of the training programs or other services that we covered today. So thank you all so much, and hopefully we'll see you at the next webinar. Have a great Friday.
Thanks, everyone.